What are we discussing on today's Locked on Dimebacks podcast? The silver lining to the 2024 D-back season, and which NL team should we hop on their bandwagon for the postseason?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Dimebacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. On today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, we'll talk about silver lining to the D-backs 2024 season. Which NL team should we hop on their bandwagon for the postseason? And then playoff predictions to end the podcast. Thank you for making Locked on Dimebacks your first listen every day. I will not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. All right. Let's get back to the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. Now let's talk about silver linings to the 2024 season, because we gotta start this podcast off with something positive. Because to be honest, guys, I am still as mad today as I was yesterday at the D-backs are not in the postseason. Every time I get an alert from the MLB app or I see a Jeff Passan bomb about the postseason, I yell and scream out loud, how are the D-backs not in the playoffs? I am still so frustrated about the situation, but we are at a point where there's nothing left we can do about it. The playoffs have officially started today, and so now the best thing we could do right now is do a little flipperoo, little twister-rooney on the D-back season and talk about the silver lining, because the silver lining is not actually what we saw from this past year. The silver lining is actually about the future, because despite the D-backs winning 89 games and improving from last year, if you want to talk about silver linings from this season, it is the D-backs winning 89 games, improving from last year, 5 more wins, led the league in runs scored. Like, there are things to feel good about from this season. Ketel Marte reestablished himself as the best second baseman in the sport, undoubtedly. Christian Walker continues to look like one of the most underrated first basemen in the sport. You had a pretty good Jake McCarthy season. He had himself a little breakout year as well. Your DHs were really important. Justin Martinez started to emerge for the D-backs. Like, there were a lot of things, individual stuff, to be positive from this D-back season. But when I'm talking about a silver lining, I'm not talking about stuff that we saw from Arizona in 2024. My silver lining is actually about next season in the future, because this D-backs team showed some promise, showed some potential, improved from last season, and despite missing the postseason, 89 wins, 95% of the time, gets you into the playoffs, especially when you have a third wild card now. Like, most years, 89 wins gets you into the postseason with just 1 to 2 wild cards. We have 3 wild cards now and still didn't make it into the playoffs. But when looking at next year, I think you could still hold your head up high about the D-backs prospects going to 2025, because the silver lining is D-backs should be running back most of this core for next season. A core that still won 89 games, a core that still was number one in runs scored. Yes, they didn't finish the season strong, but this should have been a playoff team if they didn't falter down the stretch. And I believe with most of this team coming back next season, they will put themselves in position to hopefully get back to the playoffs. You look at Gabriel Moreno, 2025, still in pre-arbitration. Moreno is not going anywhere for a long time. Marte is under contract until 2028. We have the best years of Marte under contract. He's averaging about like 15 million annually until 2028. Like, major bargain deal for a guy that should finish as an MVP finalist. Eugenio, he's got a player option, or excuse me, not player option, a club option. Dbacks are definitely picking that up for next season. The big piece that could potentially leave the Dbacks next season, Christian Walker. We've talked about him a bunch already on the podcast. He's a pending free agent. I believe the Dbacks are going to do what needs to be done to bring Christian Walker back. I think it would be a major disappointment if he leaves. So right now, I have a lot of confidence in Christian Walker returning to the D-backs. He is the biggest pending fish right now for Arizona. Josh Bell's also a pending free agent. I don't really expect him to come back. Kevin Newman's a pending free agent. I don't really expect him to come back. Geraldo Perdomo, first year of arbitration for him. Gurriel still under contract for up to 3 more years. He's guaranteed locked in for 2025, player option 26, club option 27. So Gurriel could be around 3 more years. Carroll's locked up for the next like 6-7 years. He's not going anywhere. We got an option on Grichuk, mutual option, $6 million. I think I've been saying $7 million on the podcast. So I don't think Grichuk's going to pick it up. I think he could get more money on the open market and a better role. So I do think Grichuk will be leaving. Jake McCarthy, first year of arbitration. Pavin Smith, Alec Thomas is still in arbitration, but maybe they're used as trade pieces this offseason. I could see the D-backs maybe trying to sell high or sell on some of these young guys that they have currently on their roster. Jock Peterson, I think I've been saying his option is like $20 million. His option is $14 million. I do think the D-backs are going to it's not a player option. It's a club option. Or excuse me, it's not a club option. It's a player option for Jock Peterson. $14 million. I think Jock will pick it up. Good vibes, good locker room guy. Had a great year in Arizona. I think he wants to come back after this way this season ended. I would hope he wants to come back and, get a little retribution for how 2024 ended. Erod's not going anywhere, for better or for worse. Erod will be back next season. Zach Gallen, 30 year of arbitration. And then 2026, actually a big year for Zach Gallen next year. Age 29 season, final year of arbitration. Should the D-backs maybe explore contract extensions this offseason? It's something that's going to be looming over the D-backs all next year. And not just Zach Gallen. Merrill Kelly has a club option that they're definitely going to pick up for next year at $7 million. And so that means after 2025, Zach Allen and Merrill Kelly will both be free agents. So that's huge. Ryan Nelson fought still pre-arbitration. They're not going anywhere. They'll come back. Most of the bullpen will come back outside of Scott McGough, who has a mutual option. Hopefully the D-backs decline that. Paul Sewald is a free agent. Hopefully he's gone. I don't know if you saw, apparently Mike Hazen mentioned on Wolf and Luke that he would have wanted to see Paul Sewald as the closer in the postseason. If that's true, I mean, I think Mike Hazen is a good GM. I don't want to fire him. Torrey's the guy if someone has to, fall on the sword. But with comments like that, it makes me reconsider Hazen's position with the D-backs organization, because if he thought Sewald should have been the closer come the postseason, I don't know what sport Mike Hazen's watching. And then Jordan Montgomery, $22.5 million player option if he wants to pick it up. Ken Kendrick already doing the PR tour, going on radio stations saying it was a horrible decision by me to go out there and sign Jordan Montgomery. So really putting the pressure on Jordan Montgomery, saying no one wants you back, Monty. And that's true from the fan base to the front office. And so when looking at this team, basically everyone outside of Josh Bell, Kevin Newman, McGough, and Seawald and Monty are probably coming back next season. Maybe Randall Grichuk leaves too, maybe a Jock Peterson, but 90% of this team is coming back next season. And because of that, I wouldn't worry too much about the D-backs' inability to not put themselves in position to have a postseason run in 2025. And speaking of postseason runs, we'll discuss which team to hop on their bandwagon in the NL playoff race in segment number 2. But hey, if you want to maybe take a little trip this postseason and go see your rival team play in their home city this playoff season, then I suggest booking your accommodations on booking.com. Booking.yeah. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly want to learn more about with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during postseason. Booking.com can deliver exactly what's right for you. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. So go to Booking.com, Booking.yeah. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, and let's discuss which NL team we should be hopping on for the postseason. And I believe there's only one right answer for this exercise. Maybe a couple right answers, but personally, there's only one right answer for me, only one team that I can root for. And so we're going to go through case by case and save the team for last. I think we should be hopping on the bandwagon for. And maybe we start with the playoff seeding itself, and we start from the top, the number 1 seed, the LA Dodgers. I think it's pretty clear and obvious why we cannot root for the LA Dodgers, because they're the Dodgers. Dodgers fans were rejoicing yesterday. Of course, Dbacks fans live rent-free right now in Dodgers fans' heads because we knocked them out the postseason yesterday. So you would have thought Dodgers fans won the World Series with how they were reacting on social media with the news that Arizona missed the postseason. We cannot root for the NL West champs. We cannot root for the Los Angeles Dodgers. They've been a thorn in the D-backs side. And I know Dodgers fans, they finally care about the D-backs, but historically, right, Dodgers fans wouldn't say they care about D-backs or even see them as a rival. But for the D-backs, that's not the same case, right? We probably have more hate for the Dodgers than any other fan base team in the sport. And so number 1 on the teams we can't root for list this postseason, it's emphatically the LA Dodgers. Those rich kid brats spending all the money, but no success. We are not rooting for the Dodgers this postseason. I will root for Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts. There are individual players I like on the Dodgers, but the philosophy and the spirit of the organization, I do not want to see it thrive this postseason. How about the Philadelphia Phillies, the number 2 seed? I don't want to root for them either. The Phillies are a team where their fans like to talk a lot, and I get it. Philadelphia, East Coast, braggadocious, and listen, one of the best home ballparks, probably the best home ballpark in the postseason, regular season. I'll say this, of all the ballparks I've been to, San Diego is my favorite in terms of the aesthetic, but the crowd, the ambiance, the environment, Citizens Bank Park is my favorite, but those fans, they're amazing when you're on their side, but when you're going against them in a postseason, they can talk a lot. And I was so happy to see the D-backs knock out Philadelphia last year in the postseason because of how much that fan base talked. They're probably number 2 on this list for fan bases that rejoice when the D-backs were knocked out the postseason. I think it was Dodgers number 1, then Phillies number 2, because they were throwing a parade when they heard Arizona didn't make the playoffs either. So those are the first 2 teams that we are not hopping on their bandwagon for this playoff. Number 3, the Milwaukee Brewers. We cannot hop on their bandwagon either. Personally, I can't do it because I've been on a anti-Milwaukee tirade over the last month and a half, calling them frauds, saying they're just a regular season team. I think that's still going to play out as we get into our predictions in segment number 3. But my team, the Arizona Diamondbacks, just had the greatest 2-month stretch in Major League Baseball and then missed out on the postseason. So if we're talking about frauds, I can't throw around labels right now. And so because of that, because of all the crap talking I've done to Milwaukee, and because of just my lack of faith in that team overall, actually going far and doing something special this postseason, like I don't want to root for teams that I actually don't have any interest or investment in or belief in. And so because I've talked so much crap on Milwaukee and I think it's all justified, we cannot root for that fan base this postseason. Sorry, Milwaukee. How about the number 4 seed, San Diego? We're actually going to save that team for a little later. Number 5, the Atlanta Braves. The Braves, I think, are second on the list of teams that you can root for. It's the team that I want to root for, and then it's the Atlanta Braves. Because for the Braves, I don't have a ton of animosity toward them outside of they played the doubleheader. They won game number 1. Oh, excuse me. They lost game number 1 and then didn't lose game number 2. Once you lost game number 1, you should have helped out the Dbacks and lost game number 2 as well. But the Braves did not decide to do that. So that's reason number 1 why we can't root for Atlanta. Reason number 2, do you remember when we played Atlanta like the first month of the season? It was like our second and third series of the year. Remember how we went up like 4, 5, 6 runs every single game in that series? Then our bullpen blew it every single game. If you win one of those games when the D-backs are up like 6 runs after 3 innings, you're in the playoffs right now. And so Atlanta, they killed us early in the season and they killed us late in the season in terms of our postseason hopes. We cannot root for the Braves this postseason, despite them being second to last on my list in terms of teams I have animosity for in this NL postseason race. We still cannot root for the Braves this playoffs. And then number 6, the last team, the New York Mets. We are not rooting for the New York Mets this postseason, just like the Braves. They did not help out the D-backs the last doubleheader of the regular season. You won game number 1 in a dramatic comeback fashion. Nice, so cool. And then game number 2, you got skunked, shut out, lost 1-0. You only needed 1 run. Of course, you put in all your backups as you should have done as the team that had already clinched your postseason berth, but really did not help out the D-backs. And then, of course, in the regular season, just continue to dominate Arizona as the Mets have done the last few years in the regular season. So the Braves, the Mets, the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Phillies, we cannot root for any of them. That leaves one team, the San Diego Padres. And it might sound a little counterintuitive because they are a NL West opponent, but I feel like they're this opposite side of the same coin as the D-backs. When I look at the makeup the team from the lineup to the rotation, I think they're very similar in terms of talent. I think both of those franchises have dealt with some real up and downs. I mean, the Padres have dealt with a lot of expectations the last few years, and they themselves have missed out on the postseason and have dealt with some gut punches, right? And now you see what they did post All-Star break where they really woke up. I think there's just a lot of similarities and parallels between these two teams. I was very scared to face the Padres in the postseason because I felt like they were a team that matched up really well with the D-backs. I don't have a lot of animosity toward a lot of those players on the Padres. I actually think Tatis is a ton of fun. I grew up loving Xander Bogaerts. I'm not actually an anti-Manny Machado guy. And so most of those players on the Padres actually do enjoy watching them play. The Padres as a team overall, I think it's pretty talented and have a shot of doing the damn thing as well. And so the Padres are the team we're going to be riding with this postseason. And now we'll talk about our predictions for the NL playoff race in segment number 3. And if you want to do any daily fantasy sports, then I suggest going to PrizePicks because PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Now you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the action with over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePick discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And also, if you want to place any wagers this NFL season, then I suggest going to FanDuel because, hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. My favorite thing to do on FanDuel right now is the underdog parlay. Whenever I see 2 teams that I really like who are underdogs going to NFL Sunday, I just parlay them together. And typically, guys, it kind of hits. So if you want to see money hit your bank account, just visit FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Now let's talk about some NL playoff predictions here on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast because, of course, our team is not in the postseason, so we got no predictions for how Arizona will be doing, and I'm really upset about it because if they were the #6 seed, despite them backing into the postseason, I would have picked the Dbacks to beat Milwaukee once again. But that's not the world we live in. And so right now, I'm recording this. It's going to drop during the games. So my predictions are still pretty valid, still pretty accurate, I think. Well, we'll see if they're accurate, but I think they're still pretty valid. I still think I get them in on time despite it, being live during the game. And so looking at the wild card matchups in the National League, Mets versus Brewers, Braves versus Padres, as I've been saying for a while now on this podcast, I don't believe in Milwaukee. I know the numbers are good. They're really good. The pitching very strong for Milwaukee. They have arguably the best bullpen in the National League, top ERA. I just don't believe in a team whose best player is a guy who can't even drink yet. Jackson Chirios, I think, is going to be an MLB superstar, but he can't be the best player in your lineup just yet. Maybe you make the argument Willy Adames is, but the fact that it's an argument is crazy. And who is their best pitcher in the rotation? Freddie Peralta. Okay. After that, it's just a bunch of guys, not really anyone I can trust. I just don't see the top end talent on that team. And despite me not loving the New York Mets, they've been playing great baseball over the last few months. I do think they have a pretty deep lineup. I don't love their rotation, but it is deep with guys who have a lot of major league experience. Give me the team who has been red hot over the last 2 months to beat Milwaukee in the first round of the wild card. And then Braves versus San Diego. I think that's a big series that might just be contingent on the health of Chris Sale, who sounds like he's a little bit up and down. But the Padres, again, just like the New York Mets, red hot since the All-Star break. Musgrove is back and starting to pitch a little bit better. Same with you, Darvish. The Padres are getting healthy. They're starting to go streaking. Tatis and that whole lineup is starting to cook. And guys like Jackson Merrill, big second halves of the season. Give me the Padres over the Braves, who just haven't really been able to find their footing all season long. Just a weird up and down, disappointing season for Atlanta. Give me the Padres over Atlanta. And then it would be Mets versus Philadelphia. I think that's a great NL East divisional postseason matchup to watch. But I think the Phillies right now, just on a different level than the Mets. I think the Mets have had a great run in the second half of the season, but you might be running into a buzzsaw going into Philadelphia. we'll see. Mets have been so hot the second half, but knowing how that crowd reacts to that team in the postseason, knowing how guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber step up in the playoffs, if you're the New York Mets, you might just run out a little bit of gas after being on such a bender and a heater the last 3 months, plus taking out Milwaukee in the wild card round. You might just be cooked if you're the New York Mets after that. And so I'm taking probably the most talented team in baseball in the Philadelphia Phillies to beat the New York Mets, who I just don't think they're matched up just yet. But we'll see what the Mets can do this offseason to really improve their team going to next season. Then Padres versus Dodgers. And maybe this is a little controversial, but the Dodgers rotation is just not that strong right now. It's pretty weak because of all the injuries that they have. I mean, you lost Glass now. He's gone for the rest of the season. Kershaw is absolutely cooked. You don't have Gonsolin there, of course. Gavin Stone's been hurt. Like right now, the rotation is Flaherty, who's been very good. Yamamoto, who's back. But he's been out a long time. Bueller, who's I don't know about Bueller, and then Landon Knack. Like the rotation's not good for San Diego. I think the Padres of Michael King, Cease, Musgrove, and Darvish is actually very strong. The Dodgers do have a lineup that could contend with anyone, and a lineup that's going to keep them in every single game. I mean, Ohtani can just put the team on his back in the postseason and just carry the Dodgers to the World Series. So if he does that, no bets are off. If Ohtani wants to have the greatest postseason we've ever seen, no bets are off because we have yet to see Ohtani in a postseason setting. But I think the Padres right now are actually a deeper team than the Dodgers. They're playing better baseball than the Dodgers. I think it would be tooth and nail battle between those two teams that come down to the final game of the series. But I'm taking San Diego over LA. Then that sets up a Padres Phillies NLCS, which I think would be so much fun. Those two teams throwing haymakers with Tatis and Harper, and then Schwarber and Machado and Cease and Darvish going against Nola and Wheeler. I think that would be such a fun NLCS. And I'm going to give you another controversial pick here. I think the Phillies again are going to go to the NLCS and disappoint their fans. I think it's going to be the San Diego Padres, who continue to make moves every few months, who are not afraid to be all in, put all their chips in after having rumors of their team, kicking so much money down the road and being so deep into debt and them having to take out loans to meet the payroll. After all of that, the Padres are going to go to the World Series. I think they have the talent to, from the lineup to the rotation to the bullpen. They got the manager. I think that's solid enough as well. I think the Padres are a pretty complete team that's been playing the best baseball, arguably over the last 2.5 months. Give me the San Diego Padres to be my team to ride this postseason as they go to the World Series in 2024. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy.